So hopefully this will be one of the last times you'll hear from me on this project. Provided a lot of updates over the last two years. Aaron Guz is here as well. He is with the consulting team to help answer any questions you might have. So after I give a short presentation, then you'll have a chance to ask questions or have a discussion about the draft plan. So we're excited to finally reach this stage. Like I said, it's been about a 2-year process. Today, we're seeking a recommendation from the executive committee to forward to the full board for adoption of the plan to include the recommended changes as outlined in your packet in the response matrix that we sent out. So you should have received not only the memo that contains an outline of what's within the plan, as well as the comment matrix responses to each individual comment, and then whether or not we're requesting changes to the draft plan that you can incorporate into your approval. Let's see, also, you should have received a link to the full draft plan. We sent that out, I think, back in November with a hard copy, but if you can't find your hard copy, then please view that online at our website, www.WTA2040.org. Under the library, you should see a copy of the plan there to download. There's a lot of information here. So in order to kind of focus your conversation and focus on, I think, what we see as a few key comments, we've highlighted those in the matrix. And really, it's not necessarily covering those where we're recommending changes. It's covering those where we thought there were maybe a few consistent comments, public comments, or ideas that we're addressing elsewhere. So we're trying to just really focus kind of what you're viewing, but feel free to comment on any of those items in the public comments. So most of the recommended changes we have today are minor changes to the text or graphics in the plan. However, I would say we do have one, I think more significant comment, and it deals with WTA's approach to autonomous vehicles. We did get a few comments from an individual asking for us to have more clarity around our response. And considering that comment, we felt that we're not quite ready to have a clear response to autonomous vehicles. However, we're recommending we play a wait and see approach and then assess opportunities and impacts when the technology is at a more mature stage. So we're recommending adding that comment into our draft plan as a strategy under the, I believe it's environmental section. So next, I'd like to just highlight 4 key areas in the plan for you. And they sort of mimic what we put in the memo, but I'm just going to kind of clarify some of those for you. One is, obviously, we're focusing on key priorities, and those are the three E's, as we call them: leading with equity, operating an efficient system, and advancing environmental progress. And these you see permeated throughout the draft plan. So those guide the different elements in the draft plan. And then secondarily, we have a zero emission goal. We highlight this one because we know that the board has taken some great interest in the transition to zero emission fleet and the costs and the complications with that. So we're highlighting just our goal or our strategy to transition to a zero emission fleet by 2040 through the pursuit of grant funding. And in order to accomplish that goal, and to understand that goal more fully, we're recommending, or we're proposing, a 2022 fleet transition study. So that would begin this year, and you've approved a budget for that. So we could study that issue further, understand the time frame, understand if this goal makes sense, whether or not that date needs to be adjusted upwards or downwards. And then next thing to highlight is the 2040 service network and enhanced network. By adopting this plan, you're also asking staff to implement the 2040 service network. This network represents sort of living within our means network. It increases service by 25%. It increases opportunities to access for priority populations. It introduces bus rapid transit and on-demand service. This, we believe, responds the best to the anticipated transit demand. And we're just now beginning the process to look at our June service changes, which will be based on this network. In contrast, we have the enhanced network, which increases service by 60%. So pretty substantial increase over the 2040 network. But it does require additional sales tax base. And given the current uncertainties with the future of mobility, we're not ready to recommend this as the primary network. However, it could be used in the future if transit demand increases greatly, and if the board felt like the community was ready to discuss increased tax base to support that network. And then finally, we have implementation and funding. On page 60 of the plan itself, we identify operational and capital costs. And then on 62, we lay out a sequence of actions for both service and capital changes. And so this year, we're beginning that process. We've identified a number of projects to implement the plan. Those include things like BTS, our Bellingham Station expansion project. We have a speed and reliability project. We've got ADA improvements at and to bus stops, and we have a sustainability plan that we're planning on preparing this year. So a lot of things that are going to happen to implement the plan. So that was kind of a quick key highlights of what where we're at. And so I'm just gonna stop there. Turn it back over to the board for questions or discussion. So happy to entertain questions or any discussion you have. So with that, I'm done.
Tim, go ahead and just call on people.
Okay, Todd.
Thanks, Tim. Can you comment a little bit more on the, you mentioned sales tax revenues or needing more sales tax revenues? How would that work?
Yeah, so when we, this kind of goes back to when we were developing different scenarios for the network. And we originally based upon kind of the amount of revenue that we thought we would expect to have, as well as increasing the revenue base. And through that process, we defined those two separate network plans. We felt that with our base network, that should be based upon kind of the knowns, our existing sales tax projections, what we think will happen in the future. And then alternatively, we felt that, well, having an enhanced plan was helpful in case the community was ready for that. And that does require an increase. How much, we're not really sure. So right now we're at 0.6% sales tax. So that base would necessitate an increase to something like 0.9% or more to support that level of investment. And that's not only for the operational costs, but also for capital costs, which could also come in the form of grants as well.
Thanks.
I guess this is Les. I would just hop in there to say that that's for planning purposes. We thought we needed to look at, okay, what happens if it grows, the demand grows, what would that look like? So we have something to build off of over the next 20-year period.
I was just wondering if it was anticipating growth in the base of the sales tax revenue, actually increasing the rate. So, but I get it.
Yep.
Any other questions? I don't see any hands. Okay, if there are no other questions, with this one, we're seeking a recommendation from the executive committee to forward to the full board for approval of the plan with the included staff recommendations.
Board members, this is the moment.
I'll move to forward to the full board.
Second.
And then that, does that move forward with a positive recommendation? Okay. Motion before us to advance to the full board, the WTA 2040 plan with a positive recommendation for adoption. This almost seems anticlimactic. As Tim indicated, this has been a 2-year effort, but I think we've approached it steadily. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone dissents signify by saying no. Hearing no dissents, this moves forward to the board unanimously. There we go. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay. I guess we're done with that. So then the next item, I think, is performance reports. Is
Yes,
that
sir.
correct?
And we'll have Tim, if you could just kind of walk us through those real quick, that would be great. Thank you.
Sure. I hate to make this kind of the Tim show, but here we go again.
It is the Tim show.
So
It's a good show.
I don't know if Audra, if you could share the board packet, we can kind of go to that page.
I can bring it up here.
Someone- Okay, this is really brief, but I'm just, we do a quarterly report, obviously, for the board. So we're at our 4th quarter of 2021, and I'm just going to highlight a few items on this list. I'm not going to read everything here to you, but so we had a pretty startling end to 2021. I think we could all say with floods and snow events and things like that, but I think we thrived pretty well with our transit service, providing service to those in need particularly during the flood event. So it was fairly shocking, but I think we came out of it pretty well here. We concluded a 1-year update to our collective bargaining agreement. We received 8 new buses that I think most of those are operational now in service. We allocated over 35,000 6-ride tickets to qualified social and health agencies, and they distribute these to members of our community in need. And excited to mention that the Red Cross has recognized Keith Buer. I don't know if anybody saw the video. It was a great video by the Red Cross that was out, but recognizing him for managing a violent incident on one of our buses. So that was a great job by Keith. And then finally, we have a number of new hires and promotions that are listed here. So if you can go to the next page. So not too much to mention around this, but I would say as far as fixed route performance, our ridership in 2021 was slightly less than 2020. However, the good we ended on a positive note with a bit of an increase in our ridership in our performance, and that's kind of shown in the uptick on the upper right chart here. So that's a positive trend in the right direction, and we're seeing that continuing into 2022 with slightly increasing numbers, Western being in class and some other things. So we're slowly uptaking in terms of our ridership, and we should be seeing that continue into the 1st quarter of 2022. As far as paratransit, not too much of a trend, although you see here from the middle left graph that paratransit did increase slightly in 2021 over 2020. And then Vanpool, fairly low numbers, not too much of a change there, slightly less in 2021. So that's what I have today. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Go ahead and stop sharing screen.
Tim, this is Scott. Hey, I've got a question on fixed route service. Is there any study on why it is so low? Are people staying at home, or did they switch to their cars? Do we have an answer to that question?
Yeah, there are a few factors I think that are being recognized in the industry right now. One is we still have a lot of people telecommuting right from home. They're still working from home, and that's shifting a little bit, but we still have significant numbers. I think that has less of a factor in Bellingham and Whatcom County than it does maybe in the Puget Sound area where you have a lot more high-tech workers and things like that. But it is, I think it is a factor. I think bigger for us is just the fact that Western has been all online, all remote. They just started fully in person, I think the second week of January. So those numbers didn't reflect coming back to class. And we are seeing more students riding now. There's definitely been an uptick in the number of passengers. So that's the biggest factor for us. And I think there's just a sense of concern still, of people riding and being comfortable riding on the bus. And, so they might be choosing to drive over taking the bus right now.
So is there a projected timeline at all to get back to our previous ridership highs? I mean, is it years you're thinking, or even longer or shorter, or what, is there any clue?
Yeah, what the sort of the kind of consensus around reverting back to normal ridership levels, I think most agencies feel that 2023 is more likely to get more of a return of those riders. It's going to take another year of lower ridership, and then it starts coming back in 2023. It's a speculation that it's hard to predict.
Yep.
There's a lot of different factors out there, but I think we project that we're going to get back to more normal levels of ridership, maybe not as much as we were before. I think we're still focused on those quarter riders. We're still riding, but I think others that can choose not to ride, they're waiting, and they may take longer. So I can't give you an exact time frame, obviously, but I think 2023 is where we're hopeful that ridership will return, and we're basing our service changes around return to more normal conditions.
And second question has to do with the HOP and Linden. We're in our second year of this 2-year program, correct?
That's we started in June of 2021, so we're a little bit more than 6 months into it.
Okay, and just a feeling of, is it going as planned or better than planned, or what's the general take out on that one?
Yeah, I think I would say it's going swimmingly. So I think there's two ways of looking at it. How does the community embrace that kind of service? And the second part is, what does it look in terms of the quantitative measures, right? And I think on that first point, it's going very well. I think the community in Linden has embraced the service. People are very excited about it, and we're getting pretty good ridership numbers too. I mean, it's still early, and typically for assessing new service, you wait during a 2-year cycle to make sure that ridership matures. So we're only 6 months into it, and we're getting pretty good ridership numbers. I think we're at there are days where we're taking 40 passengers a day, and that gets us up around 3 passengers per hour, which is around, I think it's a little above the level of paratransit. So that's pretty good on certain days, right? And we're seeing those numbers continue to increase. So positive signs right now for that service.
I see.
Mary has a comment on the chat on ridership as well.
Highest day ever.
Yeah.
53.
I want to follow up on Scott's question about, recovery of ridership. Do we have past data on sort of the categories of riders? The Western students, core riders, and what I might call choice riders. Do we have past data on the proportions of those folks, and can we get future data? I'm trying to figure out when we recover, who is recovering? Is our concern about kind of recovering those choice riders who may have decided to work from home or move to a car? Or are we still looking for recovery in sort of the core ridership?
From my perspective, I believe we have the core ridership. That hasn't changed significantly over the course of the past year. What's changed a lot is the Western ridership, obviously, and that's a lot easier to track because we have the direct data on that, the fare box collections, which indicate whether they're a student of some kind of Western or Whatcom Community College. Whether or not your choice rider is a lot harder to define, but I think that's the sort of ridership that it's a little bit more fickle. in terms of coming back and riding, and a little bit harder to quantify, I think. Who's in that category, and I'd say we have done past surveys. It's been a while though, and one of the more recent surveys we do is kind of whether or not a passenger has had a choice to take other means to get to wherever they're going, right? So we were doing that during our random surveys, and so that gave us a sense of, like, I think it was like 35% had to take the bus. They didn't have any other choice, where the other 65% had another choice of travel. And so we kind of look at that data, and it's been fairly consistent, those numbers, about who can choose, who has to ride and who can choose to take other means. So I think we would like to kind of continue to research that when the time is right, to see how that might have changed. But we're not quite ready to do that yet.
Yeah, I agree. I'd like to do that kind of random survey again once we're closer to what we think might be recovery, not now. But if we have our core riders still, and if the majority of the decline is due to Western, those problems will sort of take care of themselves, or that recovery shouldn't be a problem. And the question is there a small element there that really is more of an issue, that returns us to our old challenge of trying to grow ridership by expanding the base, by expanding the number of reliable users beyond the core?
This is Les. I think some of that will be driven too by change in landscape. If transit-oriented development becomes more prevalent, and those kinds of things will drive that. The other thing I think is this, from the survey standpoint, is we're going to be that's a great thing for us to do, because we're going to be needing that information for grants and other things too, where we'll have to be identifying those types of riders, and to look at environmental concerns and overburdened communities and those kinds of things. So it's a great opportunity for us to take a look at that question.
Tim, are you through with the performance report?
That's it for
Les, do you want to touch on the transportation package in Olympia?
Actually, I was going to turn it over to Maureen to give us a quick update on that.
Great, Maureen.
All right, thank you. Good morning. Big week in Olympia. As you probably know, the transportation package, funding package that's being proposed is called Move Ahead Washington, and it contains $16.8 billion for transportation over 16 years. And of that, $3 billion is proposed for public transportation. The revenue sources are a mixed bag, long list, but the top pots would be money from the Climate Commitment Act, money from the federal bipartisan infrastructure bill, as well as a one-time transfer from the state operating budget. The main impacts to WTA, there are three. The first one would be the ability to compete for either new or enlarged grant programs. And in the new category would be a bus and bus facilities program that's modeled on a program of the same name at the federal level, and would allow us to apply for grants for fleet and facilities and those sorts of things, state good repair type things. Another would be a much enlarged green transportation grant program. And you may remember the green transportation grant program is what is funding the 2 electric buses that we have on order. So that's one. The second would be, second main impact to WTA would be a $5 million let's call it a grant for our expansion of Bellingham Station project. And the third impact would be a direct payment. I think it's called a transit support payment, a substantial one every year for the coming 16 years. It's worth noting that that direct payment that would go to all transit agencies is dependent on those agencies having a youth ride free program. So while there may be some agencies in the state that are now scrambling to think about how they might do that, we of course don't have to, because this board authorized a youth ride free program that started back in July. Let's see, I also wanted to mention that the bill is getting a hearing today, or the package is getting a hearing today in the Senate. In fact, Les is on cue to jump to that meeting the moment his name is called, to express our support and appreciation. And after that, we will just be kind of keeping our ear to ground. We and our friends at the Washington State Transit Association will be just monitoring it to see what comes next.
So Maureen, the way I read it is kind of as you indicated, most of these really huge numbers are from existing revenue or sources in hand. This isn't a $15 billion revenue package to go the $15 expending package. What is the actual revenue increment that's necessary? Because in a certain sense, that's the part that is less certain.
Can you ask that a different way, Michael? I'm not sure I know what you mean.
So if 10 billion of the 15 is kind of like secured in hand, there's
Right.
no reason to trim the package back any further than that. That the argument will be on the parts that are, say, dependent on new revenues. What part of this is sort of at risk because it's new revenue dependent?
Right, I see what you mean. Oh, go ahead, Les.
If you want me to hop in, I've got those numbers.
Oh, terrific. Okay, great.
Yeah. So on the revenue resource side, the major amount is 5.4 million from the Climate Commitment Act funding that starts the end of this year. So some of those payments this is over 16 years. It isn't when it starts yet, and so we'll have to see on how that goes. Then there's 3.4 billion on the IIJA, the Federal Infrastructure Jobs Act, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act. There's a $2 billion one-time transfer from the operating budget. And then there's a variety of about the remainder. So is that 8, 10, 12? So about the remaining 5, 6 billion are a variety of fees changes. So a variety of things, including using existing bond authority, a exported fuel tax, fuel going to other states, stolen vehicle check fee, some of those kinds of things to generate the remainder.
So those top three add up to roughly,
And
I should have
about
that.
11 billion of the 16.
Okay, so is that what you're looking for, Michael? That there's about 5 billion in.
I guess the infrastructure money, I guess, is we can count on that. I don't know about this green investment or whatever, if that's already previously approved by the legislature, therefore it's not at risk. I mean, it sounds like most of this package is not at risk. They may argue about where the money goes, but the money is mostly there. Yes.
So the Climate Commitment Act the revenue doesn't start coming in until the end of 22. So it's kind of based on estimated revenue there. So we'll have to see on that. The other risk on the Climate Commitment Act money is that there's still a pending litigation from the state legislature that the governor used a line item veto to enact it sooner than what the legislature had said, and that litigation is pending. So that could be a risk where it doesn't start getting collected until after the legislative session in 23. So those are kind of the risks to the 5.4 billion Climate Commitment Act monies.
Is there any further discussion on this? Is there any further business?
I just wanted to thank Maureen for tracking all this. She's working really hard on all this stuff, and really appreciate it's taken a lot of time from her. Appreciate her keeping track of all this. So thank you.
I assume we might have a check-in on this at the board meeting next week.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is there any further business before the executive committee? Okay, seeing none, I think we're done. Thank you, everyone. This meeting is adjourned. Have a good rest of your week.